When I went into the journey of trying to understand what was going on in law, which was happening in my life, I was affected a number of years ago based on what would have been considered positive law or legislative law that came into an industry I was involved with that involved the acquisition and maintaining of wildlife in captivity for the purposes of film, for the purposes of an educational center. And it never made any sense to me, to an extent, why I would require a license to have what I considered God gave me dominion over from the beginning. Because I didn't see where man would have lost his dominion over animals and why we need a license. And I said, well, very extensively, it is expanded into the idea of property. And if I'm doing something with a name that identifies me in a jurisdiction that has laws for the purpose of governing trade, commerce, and everything around that, especially the money, and the legislative enforcement of that, and the effect of those that legislate how the money is used, well, then I could come under the jurisdiction of the rules, regulations, and duty, debt, and obligations that go with the usage of that. So at one moment, I wrote a notice that had stated that I code pleaded the reason that the Bible gave me the jurisdiction to have the animals. And where did I ever lose that? But what I failed to see at the moment, even though they left me alone, despite having enforced against many others, I was one of the only ones they didn't come through on, because I think they realized that my faith was strong enough that I most likely would not stop researching if I had reached some kind of dead end that still required me to have some kind of permission to have something that I believed was a natural, God-given right. So at that junction in the research journey, the communication basically just stated what I believed, out of God's word, and I was left alone at that moment. But I still knew there was some error to an extent in some of my communication in there, because I was still participating with the usage of title on a name that allowed them to govern the usage of that name, which of course the lawyers and those involved in government, of course, which are so heavily run by lawyers, would have the jurisdiction over and the enforcement for it. Had I realized that it was required to abandon that piece of that in order to actually do what I was doing, would have probably given me a better understanding and enlightenment at that moment. So at this stage, I'm going to be dealing with really what's going on what you've done when you entered into the Social Security or the Social Insurance Program, whatever it is called in whatever place you are in the world right now, because we know there's different trade names or different usage names for that program, but we know it runs unified pretty much under the United Nations. So we'll deal with that in the next video.